मॅडम
बोला सर.
लिंक टाकली तुम्हाला.
हां हां बरोबर.
हो. आणि मी काय म्हणतो थोडं 15-20 मिनिट तुम्ही बघता का जरा. मी थोडस दुसऱ्या आमच्या
हो हो हो
सर्व्हरवर
हां
चाललोय ना.
हो चालेल चालेल. सध्या पुरती आहे सर लाईट, म्हणजे आता मी माझ्यासारखी झाली इथे बाजूला.
हॅलो मॅडम.
हा बोला सर.
म्हटलं थोडा वेळ तुम्ही बघा,
हॅलो.
मी सर्व्हर ते येईल
हो हो
करून देतोय. हा
हो हो चालेल चालेल
हा
बघते
हा.
मी.
मी लिंक पण टाकली तुम्हाला, हे करून घ्या ऍडमिट वगैरे.
हो हो चालेल. हॅलो. हो आलं का चेक करा.
हॅलो. नाही तुम्ही दिसतायत मला. Hello. Morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Now I am
Start your
starting
session, sir.
second day session. Okay. Hello. Good morning, everybody, and welcome all my friends. International webinar. So you are welcome in the webinar. Friends, जनसेवा शिक्षण मंडल शांतारामभाऊ घोलप, आर्ट सायन्स अँड गोटेरामभाऊ पवार कॉमर्स कॉलेज शिवलई, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल सायन्स and Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai jointly organized today's international conference. The topic: COVID-19's impact on India's foreign policy. Now we beginning to start the session. First of all, now I request to Professor P.D. Sonone sir briefly introduce. Professor P.D. Sonone sir.
Yes.
Briefly introduce. Only
Yes,
1
sir.
minute. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Welcome all participants and resource person. This seminar, international seminar, 3rd June 1920. This seminar is resource person. Today's first resource person, Professor Dr. Dilip Moite, Coordinator, Hart Foundation Program, Farmers Dean, Faculty of Arts, Sajrao University, Baroda, Gujarat. And his resource person, his subject is COVID-19 and Indian foreign policy, opportunities and challenges. Second resource person of this session, Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, Executive Director, Center for South Asian Study, School of Liberal Arts, Shanghai University, People's of Republic of China. And resource person is subject of this topic, India-China relations. Third resource person of this session, Dr. Arvind Kumar, Director, Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Manipal, Karnataka. And this resource person, subject of this, India's foreign policy and national security. Lastly, fourth resource person, Professor Dr. Ashwini Mahapatra, Chairperson, Central for West Asian Studies, JNU, New Delhi, and his subject is India's foreign policy and the Gulf. And lastly, the panel discussion moderators, Dr. Professor Liaquat Khan. The Liaquat Khan is the Department of Civic and Politics, University of Mumbai. I request to all resource person, and this seminar is attending my colleagues and professors. I welcome this seminar, and to start the first resource person, Dr. Dilip Moite. I say Dr. Wag to next holding the seminar.
Hello.
Hello.
And now, friends, Today's session joined and also Professor Uddhav Terulkar in Nepal. Principal Dr. S.M. Patil sir, please welcome address.
Good morning to all. जनसेवा शिक्षण मंडळ. Good morning. जनसेवा शिक्षण मंडळ, शांतारामभाऊ घोलप, आर्ट सायन्स and गोटरामभाऊ पवार, कॉमर्स कॉलेज शिवळे, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल of Civils and Politics, University of Mumbai, jointly organized 2 days international webinar on COVID-19 impact on Indian foreign policy. First, I welcome. Yesterday is my president is the inauguration of this international webinar. Former MLA and President Jan Seva Shikshan Mandal, GP Pawar sir. Today's best speaker and dynamic personality, Professor Dr. Dilip Moite, coordinator for the foundation programs, former Dean, University of Gujarat. Second speakers, Professor Dr. Arvind Kumar, Director, Department of Geopolitics of the International Relations, University of Manipal. Third speaker and dynamic personality, Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, Executive Director, School of the Liberal Art, People, Republic of China. Fourth speaker today is Professor Dr. Ashwini Mahapatra, Chairperson, Center for the West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. Next speaker, Professor Dr. Uttara Sadguru, the Chairman of the POS, Political Science and HOD, Department of Civics and Politics, University. My college, Dr. Vice Principal G.R. Dr. PD, in Political Science, Professor Hemangi Rane, IT Coordinator and Organizer Secretary. Technical person in our college is Mr. Mayur Awar and Mr. Patil. Friends, my college is the best college in University of Mumbai affiliated. That is my institute is the best institute in Thana and Murbad Talukas Tehsil. We are the proud of to be the symbol of the quality education. Since my college is established in 1988, our college has long tradition of the empowering quality education, a noble task for the more than 30 years. All-round development of the students is our motto. Besides academic quality, we also observe cultural, social, and sport development of our students. We have the special library with the number of books in our library. Special care of the students preparing of the competitive exam is taken with the special attention. Our sports and cultural department are very active and achieve success every year. Traditional as well as the professional courses as available according to the choice of the students, BA, BSc, BCom, MSc, MCom, MA, and other faculties. Our results are also very good. We have the experienced and qualified faculties in our college. Who put up the lot of the efforts to make golden student for this better future. We have well equipment, laboratories, gymkhana, administration office, the management, teachers, and administrative staff is my very cooperative. My college provide the various opportunity of the students. We are the bound of the make marketable products are and all the know is can be done only through the quality education. So equal achievement and enhancement have become the intellectual part of the higher education. Education is the third eye who is the wise understood, gives visions and make the unable to the look into the future. Hard work is the only key to a success and there is no shortcut yet. But knowledge is the only property which no one can steal from you. But if you wish, it can with the shared with millions. Friends, my college is a NAC. First NAC is 2006. Second NAC 2011-12, and I will complete the third NAC cycle month of February. I hope that should be the today is better tomorrow. Every day that is the change in the world. That is so many problems are created in the world. That will my lastly. You all participants and delegates. That should be the you are the natural understand. That should be the in the view. जीवन ये अपने लोगों के जीवन का एक दो लाइन हम लोग आप एक मित्र बन गए जीवन का ये सफर बहुत अच्छा है उसी तरह से दोस्ती का यही सफर दोस्ती रेशम के धागे से मजबूत होती है वो जोड़ने से नहीं टूटती मैं एक बार फिर ये कहना चाहता हूँ हमारे मैनेजमेंट के प्रेसिडेंट जीपी पवार साहब, माय मैनेजमेंट एवरी टाइम दैट विल द सपोर्ट टू मी, दैट विल फिर एक बार सब आप पार्टिसिपेंट डेलीगेट्स का मैं मेरे संस्था की तरफ से, महाविद्यालय की तरफ से आपका दिल से स्वागत करता हूँ और मेरी ये दो बातें यहाँ से खत्म करता हूँ। जय हिंद, जय महाराष्ट्र।
Okay, thank you very much, sir, Patil sir. Very short but sweet welcome address. Now, I will request Dr. Liaquat Khan sir, coordinator, joint coordinator, and moderator. Please introduce the speakers of the sessions and total sessions we will conduct. Dr.
Yes, sir.
Liaquat Khan sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Wag sir. Good morning to all, to my respected professors, eminent personalities for this particular program, Dr. Devre sir, Dr. Patil sir, Dr. Sonan sir, and all learned people who are there into this particular program. Among diverse theories of foreign policies corresponding to diverse meanings of the word foreign, there are various issues which are related to the strategy of foreign policy. And today we are having a very fantastic panel which will discuss not only the foreign policy but also connect that foreign policy to the domestic policy, because unless until the foreign policy is a continuation of the domestic policy, we cannot achieve our important objectives and goals. The well-known principle that one should pick is the state should have a very good negotiator. The negotiator should be skilled, resourceful, rational, knowledge, freedom of choice should be there. And this is where the state plays a very important role in harnessing the foreign policy in trying to get what the domestic policies do not have. And with this, we have a very fantastic panel. Professor Dilip Mohite, who was Dean and also Head of Department of MS Baroda University. And right from childhood, I'm hearing Professor Mohite's talk, and he has been so elegant to discuss the continuity of domestic and foreign policy both. We also have yesterday's one of the eminent speaker called Professor Uddhav Purikal from University of Kathmandu, who yesterday could not join us, but today he is there with us, and he will be the second speaker. The third speaker would be Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, who is the executive director of Liberal School of South Asia Center, School of Liberal Arts, Shanghai University, Shanghai. The fourth speaker would be Dr. Arvind Kumar, Professor Arvind Kumar, who is also the director to the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations in Manipal University, or what the name has been changed to Mahe, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. And at the end, we have Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, who will join us in due course of time, would give us the valedictory address. Not taking much of the time, we would like to hear what our eminent panelists would like to say. So in this movement, I would request Professor Dilip Mohite sir to kindly address his views and give us his learned experience talk to us. Over to Professor Mohite sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I'm really delighted to be one of the speakers at the seminar. And I would like to thank the organizers and institutions who have organized this seminar at the right time, at the right topic. So far as this seminar is concerned, my special thanks goes to Dr. Liaquat Khan, who has always been active, and he has kept the ball rolling even after a number of days of lockdown. So I congratulate him and also wish that he keeps departmental flag flying for the next couple of years. Anyway, yesterday I was a bit bit disappointed because the topic that we had, that is the COVID and foreign policy, its implications and all, very few speakers actually touch the bottom line. And therefore, I thought that maybe I will focus on certain things which are not covered yesterday, and I will focus my talk purely on the effect of COVID on Indian foreign policy. To begin with, so far as foreign policy is concerned, let me tell you that foreign policy and a domestic policy, these are the two sides of the coin. One cannot really have a strong foreign policy unless the domestic policy is also a very, very, sound. One more thing, that so far as our domestic policy is concerned, it is based on our society, social structure. Now, unfortunately, India's social structure is not very strong, or I would say not strong at all. There are social cleavages, there are economic, cleavages, there are rich and poor. 80% of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of rich people. Only 20% people, middle class or lower middle class, and the working class, labor class, I would say. Now, under the circumstances, when the wealth is not properly distributed, you can either think of, Marxian philosophy, or you can even Rawls philosophy. That particular, country, foreign policy always suffers from some sort of, problems. And I will outline those problems, how we have been, I would say, not aggressive, but less aggressive so far as our foreign policy is concerned. Let me begin with, the infrastructure. I would like to credit Jawaharlal Nehru for laying down a very strong infrastructure so far as development of India is concerned. If you take, I will briefly mention, atomic energy, industries, even defense ordnance factories, defense factories, industries, steel industries, canals, and all those things, were worked out so beautifully. But unfortunately, the people who followed after Nehru were not able to maintain that kind of, speed or dedication for our country. With the result, there are many loopholes which developed from time to time. If you take, after Nehru period, Pakistan was identified as number one enemy. So far as China was concerned, Nehru, after the Korean experience, he knew that China does not mind killing or sacrificing 50,000, 60,000 soldiers, and they will have kind of a swarms of, soldiers coming in one after the other. So from that perspective, he thought that he would pacify China. He would have some sort of a very friendly relations with China and then go on. Anyway, I will not go into the details, but then after that, we had a golden period so far as our economy is concerned. That is from 1991-92 to say 2007 or up to 10. After that, we saw downward trend in our economy. We also saw the number of, social cleavages coming up one after the other, and that made our foreign policy rather weak and less aggressive. You take the example of 65, the ceasefire took place and we returned all the land and everything that we had acquired during 65 war. Take 71 war, we were able to, bargain, but again, we were at a zero-sum game. We were not the real beneficiary. Then subsequently, if you take, Kargil, or if you take attack on parliament, or if you take attack in Mumbai, Banaras, Ahmedabad, so many places, the attack took place by the terrorists, but then we were not able to provide any good answer. Now, so far as the Balakot strike is concerned, it should have been a real strike. I consider that as a political strike rather than a military strike. I had a heated discussion at the lecture delivered at the Department of Defense and Strategic Study, Pune University, and there are quite a few officers who raised the issue, but then I stood to my point and I said that it was more a kind of a drama than the real. Otherwise, Pakistan would have reacted at least in one way or the other so far as our strike is concerned. So anyway, I will leave this topic here. Further, as you say that so far as COVID is concerned, it came as a surprise to us. It came as a surprise to many countries. The Americans thought that it will never touch because their health standards and their health facilities are superb, the number one in the world, and therefore they will not be able to do that. But it went there also. Nearly 68 to 70 countries are affected by COVID. Now that has got a serious impact. Now you take India, how much money has been poured in order to salvage the losses that we have occurred. Industries have lost certain things. The laborers have almost 4 crores of laborers returned back to their country, and giving them subsidy or giving them some sustenance, transportation, it became a big, economic or a financial, bill, which probably a country like India would not be able to afford. Now, at the same time, the other development that took place was China. China's, military show up in Ladakh. Now, whether we took the initiative or the Chinese took the initiative, we have to depend on our media. And I don't trust our media because most of the media is not objectively putting the facts before us. But let me tell you that either China or Pakistan or both together are not in a position to wage war with India. Because if you take war with Pakistan, number one, I think the Chinese also would not appreciate that or would not like India and Pakistan to fight. What is the reason? The reason is very simple. China has invested heavily in Pakistan. If you take Obor or CPEC or industries, or if you take nuclear bomb, the supply of arms to Pakistan and passage. Pakistan is a very strategic, country, and Pakistan provides a passage to China to hot waters through Gwadar, port. Then it also provides a kind of access to Afghanistan. It also provides access to Central Asia from where the oil is coming, and without touching the other, bottlenecks in the Arabian Sea, China can import its oil very easily from Pakistan. Now, under the circumstances, no sane country or sane leader would ever think of a war or a serious kind of a conflict with the other country which would be in a position to destroy its investment in at least Pakistan. We may not be able to face China, but so far as China is concerned, it is almost about 10 to 15 years ahead of India in terms of military power, in terms of economy. Now, if you take economy, they are almost, I think, surplus with the United States of America. The treasury bond and the reserves, it is not going to really affect. And what Trump has been saying that it is the Chinese, who have spread this particular virus all over the world. It's not true. I don't subscribe to that particular point. The China bashing, I would not like China to be given a preference or a favor. But at the same time, I would like to look at it from a very realistic perspective, that the Chinese would not like to do that. And therefore, I would like that so far as India is concerned, its foreign policy has not been aggressive. It has always been a kind of a soft policy. I gave you the examples of 1965 war. I gave you example of 1971 war. I gave you example of Kargil. I gave you example of attack on parliament and so many such things. So Pakistan is building us very slowly, and it's a kind of a permanent war. whatever our soldiers are dying. So in order to meet with this particular challenge, you require a very sound economy. Now, under the circumstances when your economy is in a bad shape, you see the GDP. You to see the article in today's Times of India. The GDP has gone down to the extent where we are not in a position to wage war or fight effectively. Unless your economic, like I remember in 65, probably didn't have ammunition or infrastructure or the economic resources to carry on the fight for a longer time. And again, when you have this kind of a attitude, when you have this kind of a soft attitude and soft state, I think the advantage goes to the enemy's adversaries. And therefore, I would like India to follow a kind of a realistic kind of a policy in the present context. Now, I don't subscribe to, a Chinese prime minister or a president coming and taking him to and jhula usko, then Trump coming and 100 people gathering in. Now, it's not easy to get these people. But this type of diplomacy is not going to work. If you remember 1971 war, Mrs. Gandhi was very tough with of Galis also. But at the same time, she stood firm and very, I would say, cleverly, she signed a friendship and cooperation. Now, this was the kind of aggressive foreign policy we require in order to see that India becomes a fourth great power, with Nehru at any stage in the parliament in 1954. But as I told you, that we have our social structure so weak, over which our, the structure of the state relies. Now, if you have weak social structure and it results into a weak, once the weak state is there, you are always bullied by anyone. Now, so far as US is concerned, you take this particular policy of the United States, there are two major interests in it. Number one, selling arms. And we have been very soft so far as buying arms are concerned in the United States. Had it not one in AI, we could have about 5 squadrons in the same price for which we have paid huge amount to the French authorities, French manufacturers for buying Rafale aircraft. Now, these are the policies. We don't want to please some, country by. We have to be realistic. It is Russia who came to rescue of India, and we have to maintain a kind of a balance so far as our military security is concerned. Now, so far as health is concerned, again, I would say that our poor structure, our hospitals are lacking facilities. We don't have enough of medical, facilities. We don't have enough of medical staff. We don't have enough of medicines. And look at the countries like England or United States or China. They are desperately trying to find out a kind of a resistive medicine for COVID-19, whereas our spend not dedicated medicine virus. So why are we lacking behind? The reason is that our government. Now, I'll give you one simple example. We were making submarine, and from the horse's mouth, who was in charge of making this submarine, government funds would not come. They will just wait for government funds and they will be diverted to some other place. So if the submarine was to be made in a 2 years' time, it would take 4 years, 5 years, or sometime even 6 years. Look at the Tejas aircraft. How much time we have wasted on Tejas aircraft? 30 years, and we are able to get this. So I look at the foreign policy under the circumstances is still, it was weak. It was soft foreign policy when we needed an aggressive foreign policy, which was only during the 1971 war. But now we have to be aggressive foreign policy, and we should not fall bully to either United States or any great power which is to take advantage of strategic or geopolitical location in the Indian Ocean or in the south, or with our neighbors, like China is following a cabbage policy. They are trying to rip open the neighbors. Look at Nepal. Nepal is not agreeing to our, construction of the road. You take Sri Lanka. They have given, port to be developed by Chinese. Maldives, Seychelles, all these countries, Burma. Now, if you take, all these countries are being patronized by the Chinese, and that is possible only by a strong economy. So my submission is, in the final analysis, that so far as our economy is concerned, it has taken a downward trend because of COVID. It's a further kind of a downward trend, and we will find it extremely difficult. Neighbors have gone to their houses in order to put our house in proper order, production, industries, medical facilities, roads, communication, and all this cannot be prevented. The virus cannot be prevented on account of globalization. Communication system, interstate trade, everything has resulted into a kind of a intra-state trade, or tourism, or you may even take any other reason for which political reasons, or any strategic reasons. This particular trend is not going to stop with the modern communication and the development of globalization. So in this case, we will find it extremely difficult to hold to our economy. If our economy is strong, in that case, the social structure also can be improved. But so far as social structure is concerned, day after day, we are trying to weaken it, either by the people or by the authorities or by the vested interests. So we have to plug those loopholes which are there in our social structure. And the last point that I would make is corruption. If you take corruption, it has really resulted into a parallel economy. We had been talk about removing corruption, but we have not been able to do that. We have continued with corruption, whether it is Gujarat or it is Maharashtra or any other state. Corruption has not stopped. And as long as corruption and the rules, the labor laws, or the rules of the government, bureaucratic attitude, red tapeism is not removed, I think the economy of this country would continue to suffer. And so far as we are concerned, we might go backward rather than marching forward. Though tall promises could be made by the leaders, but I have my own apprehension so far as the foreign policy is concerned. You have to build an economy by having a very vigorous foreign policy and very strong domestic policy. You have to have India as a secular state. You just can't avoid it. You say 80% are Hindus, 88% are Hindus, but then look at their culture. The South Indian has a different culture. If you go to South, the Chennai people will say, no, our culture is something different. Our food is something different than the Karnataka. The Karnataka people will say that we grow, Andhra people will say that Karnataka grows a lot of food items, but they don't know how to cook. Now, these are the, I would say differences that we have. A South Indian different angle. And so far as we are concerned, we still think in terms of, South, North, or caste basis. As long as there is not improve, we will ultimately go down. And the chances are that at least for 4 or 5 years, India's economy nor the social structure is going to improve. And therefore, our rulers have to be extremely careful in implementing the foreign policy where we can maintain our self-respect, we can maintain our interest, we can serve our nation in the best possible way. And that is possible by neutrality, non-alignment. We don't have to be leaning towards West or East. We have to maintain a neutral position. And that is what I call it a balance. A proper balance in our foreign policy would neutralize even the crisis like COVID, because
Yes, sir.
everybody would be happy to come forward and help India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this very informative. And that is the reason what I like about Professor Mohite, that he has been very analytical and he has been giving us very, very strong information, right, connecting domestic policies to the foreign policy. And it is very hard, Professor Mohite, to stop, because we are tempted to hear him not for just 10 and 20 minutes. We would like to hear him for hours together. But still, since we are online and we have this limitation of time, so that is where after we finish with the four speakers, definitely we'll have a discussion on what has gone wrong with the domestic policy, the connecting between domestic policy and foreign policy. Before that, we also have one more very eminent speaker, Professor Uddhav Purekal from Kathmandu University in Nepal. So I want him to give us some insight on India-Nepal relation and why this problem between Nepal has become, because we had a very strong friendship treaty between India and Nepal, and today we are at a stage where we are having some problems. So over to Professor Uddhav Purekal to give us some insight of India-Nepal relations. Yes, Professor Uddhav.
Thank you, Professor Liaquat Khan sir. It was always very good to interact with you. My surname is not Purekal, but Pakurel. I have to correct.
Yes, yes.
Pakurel, P-Y-A-K-U-R-E-L. I think that there was some mistake in poster as well, I hinted. Thank you once again for inviting me, and it is such a very eminent persons before where I'm speaking, and I could listen Professor Mohite, and in a very particular manner, and he has raised a couple of issues already, and how to start it is difficult after listening Professor Mohite, but yes, definitely I agree with his points. For example, the way he tried to subscribe Modi's Nehru's policy as far as China and Pakistan is concerned, and I think even today the very position is almost similar as far as state-state relation is concerned, but if you go through kind of perception of the people, I find difference within India. For example, once I visited Mumbai in the invitation of Professor Khan, I have had interaction with a lot many people, and the almost dominant view was such that, oh, Nepal to China ke paas gaya, meaning Nepal is no more having good relation with India, rather it has tilted towards China. That is what was the perception, and that very perception has been further strengthened by Indian Army Chief recently on the issue of this border dispute we have with Nepal and India. I think particularly I should discuss about this and kind of consequences we could see. Why I try to subscribe Professor Mohite was due to a couple of facts. For example, yes, definitely on Nepal, by and large, China and India are together in many cases. For example, if you refer 1954 case, while Nepal proposed to have diplomatic relation with China, and Nehru was consulted by Chinese Prime Minister, and they had a long discussion, and I remember one word, for example, once the discussion started, Nehru said, oh yes, definitely till now we are looking after Nepal's security and foreign policy, but we don't have any problem if King is ready to establish the diplomatic relation. But the way America is pouring money in the name of library and education in Nepal, that is kind of problem for us. That is what was the argument by Nehru while that issue was discussed with China. And we could see, for example, even on the case of that part where Professor Mohite referred, for example, Indian Home Minister inaugurated that very road, which is connecting to this Mansarovar on the 8th, and Nepal raised this issue, and eventually there was kind of protest later. There are a lot many things after it, and that very part also was having kind of understanding between India and China. I could see, for example, in 1954 there was agreement between India and China on Tibetan region, and that Lipu Lake, which Nepal claimed as kind of Nepali territory, was given or mentioned in that very agreement, meaning China and India were together to mention Lipu Lake, the controversial or outstanding issue between Nepal and China in 1954, and that very issue has was again discussed and even agreed upon while Narendra Modi visited China in 2015, 5 years back, meaning 1954 and 2015 both are almost the same for Nepali people, because on the one hand there is outstanding issue between Nepal and India regarding border, but on the other India and China are together. That is how we could see. I could agree with Professor Moitia saying that yes, definitely for India, China is not that much big enemy. They properly handle it, but once the similar relation is on the table, for example, relation between Nepal and China, Pakistan and China, Bangladesh and China, Sri Lanka and China, and Indian people were having kind of perception as if we should not have relation with our neighbor. That is kind of a problem, I guess, to be understood from Indian side. You have big trade, I think big trade between you and China. You have very nice relation between you and China. Your Prime Minister visits China, Chinese Prime Minister visits you, but no problem. But once Nepal Prime Minister visits China in India, there is hue and cry. That I don't understand, because at least for Nepal, we are a small country, but situated between two big giants, and we have some inferiority or small country syndrome that has to be acknowledged. And as far as this Moitia's argument about economy and kind of relation, I guess we should look at it from the perspective. For example, even today, Nepal has been given, I think, more. For example, India is the largest development partner for us, not China. And even in very many crises, for example, earthquake and etc., India is the one to promise fairly large amount to support to Nepal than China. China would be always maybe distance second after India, but it's not economic, but I think perceptional thing we have to change. And why it is so, why we couldn't maintain this, we couldn't convey India saying that no, we are not tilted towards China because of many facts. We are culturally, politically, socially, linguistically, and through many things we are very much connected with India. But we had to communicate from different angle, but we are not able to do it. And for that, I think Nepal and India both should be blamed, and even scholarship like or academia like you and myself should be blamed, because we have not kind of strengthened kind of scholarship to understand each other. For example, we hardly have scholars from Mumbai to understand Nepal, and even there is hardly kind of interaction, academic interaction or other kind of interaction from Gujarat, etc. So for them, Nepal, yes, definitely they feel like, oh, it's like my part, but it's not under my hand. But what is the socio-political thing to be considered to strengthen relation? What could be the proper solution to deal with countries like Nepal with small country syndrome? These are the things to be discussed within academic forum like this. And for this, I think we have to have more exchange, more interaction, more more research oriented things we have to build on. Otherwise, you see, we won't understand you, neither you understand us, and then we time and again continue blaming each other. For example, I remember earlier we used to have a couple of centers like in Calcutta, BHU, Rajasthan, Delhi, but not in other part of India. And even in Nepal, we hardly have India Study Center. Our university could not produce India scholars, and then we rely on people who are having very less knowledge about Indian society, Indian culture, Indian way of thinking. That is how we could intervene. For example, why I'm saying so, for example, would be recently also during the pandemic, there is one perception, and this perception is always similar. For example, only Nepalese poorest of the poor are working in Nepal, and in Nepal brings a huge amount of remittance from India, and that is how it survives. And this very rhetoric has been kind of result of lack of interaction between us. For example, those who are staying in Mumbai, or very many diplomats in India are coming all the way from southern part, Kerala and etc. And they don't know kind of human relation in Nepal and India. We have open border. We have very good exchange of labor. Huge amount of Indian poorest of the poor also just come to Nepal for their bread and butter. And that is how this open border has been the source of livelihood for both of the poorest of the poor. But there is only one way of communication, as if Nepalese are working in India, and even they don't rely on kind of this remittance scenario. For example, I give you one data. India is third remittance, Nepal is third source of remittance for India, and that takes at least 3,016 million US dollar per year from Nepal. Whereas Nepal also get remittance from India, but that is almost one third, 1,021 million US dollar only from Indian side, because our poor people work there having a very small salary. But Indians, yes, definitely poorest of the poor are also here, but also rich people to do business. That is why remittance also is kind of not discussed within us. Only we are blamed that, oh, if you try to if you try to argue with India, then maybe what would happen to future of the poor? This kind of proposition could be often made by Indian people. That is why I think in this scholarly forum, what I want to say would be, for example, we have to have studies, and we have to have infrastructure, and we have to have this human resource to understand each other through research and studies. That is how only we can have fair argument, and that is how only we can maintain relation. And if it is not such, then only kind of rhetoric, or this the way media are now talking, anti Nepal China के पास गया, अब China Nepal हमारे साथ युद्ध कर सकते हैं क्या, kind of very silly way of putting Nepal analyzing military strength and etc. won't help to have good relation from either of the side. And in Nepal also, we don't have many scholars. That is why they rely on kind of very so-called nationalist rhetoric, and try to beat drum against this India. So to have a better understanding, we have to strengthen our study. That is how only we can strengthen our relation. And as far as foreign relation is concerned, I guess whenever there is difficult time, Nepal and India would be having problem. For example, just after earthquake, yes, definitely India supported us. It was Indian Prime Minister who informed Nepali Prime Minister about earthquake, because our Prime Minister was away, and that is how through Ramdev Modi knew it, and he just tweeted to our Prime Minister. That is how, and all in hours there were Indian support. As I mentioned, a big promise from India in the rebuilding process as well. But all of a sudden there was blockade, and I think this kind of misunderstanding may not help. And again, this time as well, along with this pandemic, yes, definitely Narendra Modi did couple of good things. For example, he tried to even re-energize SARC, inviting all leaders in a webinar, and he could even create kind of pandemic funding to support South Asian region. But all of a sudden, then why Nepal was provocated by the way this road was inaugurated, the way the army chief spoke, because he is the army chief who is honorary general of Nepal as well, and we have had very good relation. We still have very good relation between two armies, and definitely open border. We are yes, definitely there is political boundary, but culturally, socially, we are very closer. So, and then why such a statement hurt Nepali people while Nepalese are also suffering and struggling against this pandemic? These are the questions to be raised within, because we are one people, one civilization, and that is how only we can build on, we can have good relation. Definitely not a very good relation, but there are many ways or areas to strengthen it, and definitely we should do it, because otherwise neither we have any possibility to support our own people without having good relation with India, nor even India also, because for India also it is difficult to assert as a regional power, because if all neighbors are creating problem with them. For example, during the pandemic, we could see a kind of failure of Indian foreign policy, because on Nepal, definitely Nepal may be blamed for many things, but why India could not give benefit of doubt to Nepal settling this kind of issue, because it has been the issue for years, and at least from the government side, from Prime Minister's level, this very issue has been acknowledged as outstanding issue since 1997. Because while I.K. Gujral was in Nepal, that has this Kalapani issue has been considered as one of the outstanding issues resolved through the discussion, and then onwards, in every document, this very issue has been raised, and all of a sudden, this Indian chief of the army staff come and say to audience or Indian people, saying that, oh, I don't know why Nepal raised this issue this time, and must be someone behind. Yes, it is not first time. This has been the outstanding issue for years to be resolved, and why we could do it, number one, and why we blame China, because it has been raised by Nepal on its own, and there is no China at all. And as I mentioned, for Nepal, we know India and China are together in many issues related to Nepal, and that has been since 1954 to even 2015. And this road has been constructed along with the agreement with China. That also, at least my Indian friends should know, and definitely we should discuss about this in details. But I'll do more. I'll go through more if there is question, and I'll be happy to send some materials if you want to understand further. Thank you very much. Your mic is mute, sir. प्रोफेसर साहब, आपका माइक म्यूट है.
Hello, Professor Uddhav. It was very fine to hear you giving a very strong insight of what has happened between India and Nepal, and how fair the foreign policy objectives are to be fulfilled, and how it will be further carried out. And we would certainly look into the issues. We also would like to have some questions later on, but due to the time logging, we would like to also hear Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, who is also there. He is also heading a center a center in Shanghai University, China. So he also would like to give us the insight of India-China relation, and how China is coupling up with India's foreign policy. So over to Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, sir. Yeah, are you here? Are you hearing me, Rajiv Ranjan, sir? Hello.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes. Kindly, the floor is yours, sir. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay. Hello.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You're audible.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Professor Liaquat, for giving me this opportunity to have here with eminent personality and speaker here. And I would like to thank also Jan Seva Shikshan Mandal to giving me this platform to share my thought on India-China relation. What I have done is I have divided my presentation in two parts. One, pre-COVID era, and then post-COVID era. And each part has been divided into two sections dealing with the world order. That is, we always talk about the post-COVID world order. So I'm going to here talk about what was the pre-COVID world order and then post-COVID world order. And in both sections, I would be touching upon India-China relationship. So let me begin by, because we keep talking about world order. So let me define a world order, what I understood by world order. Like we know that it's, when we talk about the order, is about the body of rules, norms, and institution that governs the relation between the key players, how they are going to play or how they are interacting at international level. Now, there is a two very interesting concept that comes into our mind when we talk about world order. That one is, we basically talk about world order, and then there is an international order. We tend to use this term or concept like interchangeably. So we don't see any kind of differences between these two concepts. But there are some differences in this concept or the two words, that is world order and the international order. Now, when we talk about the world order, is basically is about how the United States has created this order made up of international rules and institutions, free trade and democracy in the post-World War era. Now, when we talk, there is a little bit difference when we talk about international order. International order is also about the order or rules and institution that has been created after the COVID era. But the order, we have tend to interact with the institution and with among ourselves, that is country, under the rules made by United Nations or any other international organization, rather than trying to assimilate ourselves into the US-led world order. That is where the US is dictating the terms. Now, Chinese scholar and former chairman of a foreign committee of People's Congress in China, Fu Ying, has written a book, namely Kan Sirche, that is See the World. And there she very clearly defines what is world order and international order. It says that the China doesn't have any problem with the international order, but they're not going to okay with the world order that has been created or constructed by the US. And she gives a very good example that if you have this an apartment, look at as a world, and there's a one apartment or every flat, each flat for every country. then I'm going to arrange my flat according to my view, my vision, that is whatever the Chinese view is, that is feng shui or whatever. So that means they want to arrange the whole structure within their house according to their own will. So they are not going to see how the US is going to arrange the house or the chair or the beds in the room. Now, if we talk about this whole world order, so now after the Cold War era, that has been, we always believe that this is a liberal world order. Charles Glaser, a professor at Washington University, says this liberal international order is nothing but an American foreign policy. In other words, we can say that this world order has been sugar-coated as world order or liberal world order, which is essentially a US-led unipolar world. Now, so that's why Charles Glaser says that there is nothing good about this liberal international order. And this liberal international order has outlived its life, its uses. Now it needs to change within the system. And then we have a lot of scholars like George Ekenberry, when he talks about to preserve and protect the liberal international order. Then there is also a scholar called in Harvard, Graham Ellison, and he says that we have seen a lot of myths about this liberal order, and he says that myth of liberal international order. What does he mean by myth of liberal international order? He says that we believe, or we tend to believe, that this liberal order has given us a peace, what the Immanuel Kant says, the perpetual peace. But there are a scholar who believe that this is not the international order, but it's a bipolar world system before the Cold War that has given a kind of a peace, a long-lasting peace. So it was not a liberal order, but it's a bipolar world. And in this, George Mearsheimer also viewed this as that he also believed that this is a bipolar world is much more stable and peaceful than what we have seen in liberal international order. Now, if you talk about what pre-COVID era order was, or there was a tussle between China and US on various accounts like trade, security, 5G. We have seen that there is a trade war going between US and China. There is, of course, there is a trade deficit of $419 billion between US and China. We have also a trade deficit, but here Trump, also to satisfy its domestic audience and also to benefit from this trade deficit, and also to launch a kind of coordinated tussle between US and China to get some benefit from China, they launched this trade deficit. And we have seen in the how this trade war has revealed itself. US imposed tariff of more than 360 billion, and then China retaliated with 110 billion. Now we have seen that there is also a discussion going on to how to resolve this trade deal, and we have seen they have a kind of phase one of deal where China is pledging to boost US import and then going to import products worth 200 billion above 2017 level. But it's not even, it was deal. So we have seen after this COVID era that this is not going to happen. We have also seen that how this tussle is going into a 5G network, where Huawei is a kind of a torchbearer in this 5G network security. And we know that this 5G network transmits huge amount of data. It acts like an artillery in your bodies without any disturbance that travels from one part of the body to another part of the body, and that's 5G is going to do that. Now the question here is how the China is going to control it, how China is going to benefit by controlling this 5G network. And people believe that this 5G will gradually will try to influence political and military influence in other country who is going to agree with the 5G. Now, so these are the like pre-COVID era US China tussle. That is also we tend to debate about how the liberal world order is dismantling. Now, in this pre-COVID era, we have also seen India-China relationship. And if you want to like see what are the factors that contribute in India-China relationship, we have seen in last 70 years, there has been many ups and downs. And I would say we haven't done good on India-China front, but basically we have managed the India-China relationship. So we haven't moved forward from where we started in 1950s or 1950s when we had this first diplomatic relation with the PRC. And unfortunately, we are celebrating 70th anniversary of diplomatic relation in April. We also, the India and China agreed to host 70s events to celebrate this 70th anniversary of diplomatic relation. And what we are doing is my own words that we are kind of what the COVID has distorted this 70th event. So we are holding a 70th day of a standoff at the Ladakh border. So this is the reason that instead of celebrating 70 events to celebrate, we are doing a face-off again. Now the point again here is how this India-China relationship is channelized. What are the factors that influence? What are the factors that influence to move ahead? So if we see the basic elements of India-China relationship, then we can see that there is a more people-to-people contact and economic engagement. But again, at the same time, there is a trade deficit of $56 billion out of total trade of $96 billion. We have a political confrontation on many issues, whether it's a Quad, it's Indo-Pacific, it's a BRI, it's NSG, it's a UNSC. So these are the political confrontation. Also, we have two problems where we have like, I say 2.5, that is one is border tension, Pakistan, and half that is Tibet. So these are the factors that keep coming into India-China relationship. And let me tell you that all this border, Pakistan and Tibet has this element to otherwise anytime can destabilize the whole India-China relationship. And we are at moment, we are experiencing how this border incursion in many places in the western sector and even the middle sector we have seen, or even the eastern sector we have seen that has the potential, or you can say that is totally halted or totally stopped the India-China relationship to move ahead. Now, coming to the point again, from 1950 to 2020, we have seen there was a break, or there is a gap in India-China relationship after 1962 till 1988, when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi took a landmark visit in 1988 to improve relationship. And in 1988, when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China, he had a very good talk with Deng Xiaoping, Chinese leader, the Chinese, another paramount leader or core leader, for 90 minutes. And here, Deng Xiaoping told young Rajiv Gandhi that if we want to create or we want an Asian century, there is no other way than India and China have to come together and work together. So now we are saying from 90 minutes talk to Prime Minister Modi had 600 minutes of talk with President Xi in first informal meeting in Wuhan. So we have traveled from 90 minutes talk to 600 minute talks. That's a good thing if we see where there is a high level of engagement. We have also seen that India and China have established more than 30 dialogues mechanism at various levels. Mind you, this is only 30 dialogue mechanism. If we compare with US and China, there are hundreds of mechanisms to talk about, to cover bilateral, political, economic, council, all these issues bilaterally at the mechanism level. Now, coming to the trade, we have also moved from $1 billion to 100 billion trilateral trade from 1980 to 2020. Now, the sad part is we have also traveled from Demchuk, that was the 7 days standoff, to 73 days Doklam standoff in 2017. And we don't know if the Ladakh standoff is going to surpass this 70-day standoff. So if you will see in the data wise, we have traveled a lot, but at the same time, we are going backwards when it comes to the border. That, having said that, it means that India and China has to resolve this border issue at the earliest. And these are key words when the Chinese and Indian special representative, they met last for 21st special representative meeting. They used this word. From Chinese side, they said earlier harvest. What we said is at the earliest stage. But what happened, we are saying in Ladakh. So that means there are certain issues which can jeopardize otherwise a good relationship, India-China relationship, to move ahead. Now, coming to the point when in April this year, to give a message when this shared the greetings between President of India Kovind and President Xi Jinping, and then you have a Prime Minister sharing, Modi sharing message with the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. Now, this is very interesting. They made a phone call, or they sent a message on April 1st this year, and after that, there is no talk, direct talk with the leaders. At the same time, Chinese President Xi Jinping is having a talk with leaders of all around the world to discussing how to contain and fight this coronavirus. None has been with high-level leaders, I'm saying. Of course, there is a talk between foreign ministers, but there is not with President Xi or Prime Minister Modi. Now let me read Prime Minister Modi message to Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. And this is, I think, summary of what we see in India-China relationship. And this is also a kind of idealism, or you can say that this is a romanticization of the India-China relationship. But that doesn't, I think, is very far from the reality now in last 70 years. If we go beyond 1949 in Maurya or Qing dynasty or Tang dynasty, then we can see that there is, of course, there are some good relationship. There was not so much tension. Now let me read, and I quote Prime Minister Modi: India and China are two ancient civilizations with a long history of mutually beneficial exchange over centuries. Today, we are two large developing countries and emerging economies who are increasingly playing an important role on the global landscape. As such, good relation between India and China highlight conducive not only for our respective countries, but are also important from the perspective of peace, stability, prosperity of our region and the world. So here's the key word. The India-China relationship is not only for betterment of our region, that is South Asia, or the extended region, that is Asia, but also for the world. And he also said further that the COVID-19 pandemic was a reminder to us of interconnected nature of our world today. And therefore, there is a need to adopt a truly global response to it. And we haven't seen that. So there is no coordinated effort to tackle this coronavirus that we have seen during 2008 financial crisis, where the G20 was activated, and then we have seen how they have injected liquidity in the market. Of course, this time also G20 came to inject the liquidity in terms of $5 trillion, but it was all only to revive the dying economy, nothing to contain the already the country as grappling with the COVID. And if you see the presidency message to the our President Kovind is echoing what the Prime Minister Modi has said. So now coming to the point of what would happen in the post-COVID world order, we have seen that what we are experiencing is that there is going to be a kind of more intensified US-China rivalry that we are experiencing it. Now there is a new concept, not new concept, there's a debate coming up that this is a new Cold War. And Chinese scholars saying that this is a new Cold War, but without ideological confrontation. A Chinese professor at Tsinghua University, Yan Xuetong, says that this is a new Cold War because there is a bipolar world, and he believes, and by the way, Chinese are very happy when we say that this is a bipolar world, because bipolar world negates the presence of other country. So they are happy. So they are saying that this is a bipolar world where the US and China is going to interact or tussle, whatever they are going to do. Then he believed that there is a Cold War pattern to say that this is a Cold War. And he said there is a new characteristics of this Cold War is digital competition that we have seen in Huawei 5G. We are using Zoom. This is also a digital competition where we are saying a Blue Jeans, Google Meta, Google Hangout. There are a lot of, these are the digital competition. And of course, when there is a competition, there would be a kind of to create a negative narratives also. So the both are fighting with these negative narratives also and trying to push their own version of agenda. Now, whether this is a new Cold War or not, Australian former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd says that this is, of course, not a Cold War 2.0, but he says, and I quote, it looks like Cold War 1.5. Now, what is meant by Cold War 1.5? He says that this post-COVID era is going to be neither a Pax Seneca nor a renewed Pax Americana. And they're not going to rise. Rather, he believes that the both power is going to be weakened at home and abroad both. And the result will be continued slow but steady drift toward international anarchy, that a realist school of belief. That means we are going to experience a world system without a world leader. That's anarchy. That's a key fundamental of realist school of thought. We also believe that there is going to be a rolling back of globalization, or some believe that this will be a kind of gated globalization, or maybe I think that there will be a kind of a reversal, not all, but some kind of, there will be a break in supply chain that we are believing. Now, there is another scholar from a bureaucrat scholar from Singapore, Kishore Mahbubni, and what he is very optimistic, and he says that in the post-COVID world, we are going to see or experience the end of Western domination. And he says that this is going to be a resurgence of Asia in the world affairs and in global economy. He also believed that this is going to be creating a whole set of new norms and rules, and that's why there will be a new world order. He also believed that what we have seen, that the Western country have failed to contain the COVID, and what we have experiencing is the most East Asian country are successful in controlling the COVID, whether it's South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, or China, or Vietnam. So of course, there are some like New Zealand, Germany is also successful, but he's saying that what we are going to see is we are going to experience a growing respect and admiration for East Asian one, and we may have this Asian century coming up. I don't know whether it's going to true or not, but what we have seen is the Asian countries are more successful in containing this COVID. Now coming to the India-China, for me, I don't think there is going to be a fundamental change or radical change in India-China relationship. The old set of problems will be continuing. So there, I would say that we are going to continue with our own policies. But now when we see there is a new Cold War, so where I see India will have a kind of an upper hand in bargaining. So it depends on now India, how the India is going to play its card to maximize its interest. There is also debate about that this Cold War is unlike the earlier Cold War where India has to follow this non-alignment movement, where the USSR was in position to help India. Now in this Cold War, a new Cold War, China is not going to help. So there is only one partner, that is United States. So India should tilt or maybe join the US alliance to contain China. I would rather say that because we are still a rising country, we need economic assistance, economic trading partners, and we also need a country to help us to get into a more coveted membership of international organization, whether it's UNSG or it's a United Nations Security Council. So I would say that in this scenario, the India could have hedging a strategy to maximize the interest and leverage this a swing position rather than committing to the one side. Now, why I said that to committing to one side, because we have seen if we commit to one side, then there is a problem that we are not going to get out of their shadow that we have seen in Australia, in Japan, in South Korea. So that's why we as a country with 100 years of civilization where we don't want to subjugate under any other country and we want to have our own great power status. So in this scenario, India has one option, that is hedging to maximize their interest. And I would be happy to take questions. Thank you. I will end here. Professor Liaquat.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Ranjan sir, for giving us very insight on India-China relation, comparing pre-COVID and post-COVID. We are actually running short of time, and we want to also hear Professor Arvind Kumar, because he will definitely have a lot of insights, and he is a very good friend of the department. Rajiv Ranjan also was there for our department lectures in PG Diploma in International Studies. So that is how we got in contact with Rajiv Ranjan. Next speaker is Professor Arvind Kumar, who has been again a very good friend of the department, and he has a very strong insight on India, on India's national security also. Because yesterday I was hearing him for a long period, for a long time, on India's preparedness, defense preparedness, and he had a strong insight. So I now request Professor Arvind Kumar to kindly take another 20-25 minutes of his time, and after him we will have a small discussion on the present status of India's foreign policy and COVID-19. Yeah, over to Professor Arvind Kumar. Hello.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Khan.
Yeah.
Let me, at the outset, thank all the institutions for coming together and organizing this great event. And provisions goes to you because you have taken this initiative.
Yes.
The topic given to me again is a very broad-based topic. It is on India's foreign policy and its linkage with national security. I think so far we have heard very good presentations on various issues. Obviously, we heard the Nehruvian framework by Professor Mohite. We heard about how Nepal perceives India now and vis-a-vis how India has been perceiving Nepal. And also we have heard a very good presentation by Dr. Rajiv Ranjan on the broad contours of foreign policy and where does India-China relationship stand. So I think what I will do is that I will give you a broad-based overview that what are those elements of India's foreign policy which have impacted in a manner and how India has been transitioning to a level where it has all the potential to negotiate from a position of strength. When India became independent, India had taken 3 decisions. And these 3 decisions really guided India's foreign policy orientations. The first decision was when the whole world was either joining the capitalist bloc led by the United States or the communist bloc led by the formerly Soviet Union, India chose the path of non-alignment. Because India had this particular view in mind that how best India can be showing its assertiveness from the day one, where it will have its some place or some space for itself in creating certain opinion for the international system independent of these 2 power blocks. The second decision, which was again very crucial for India, because the rest of the world was either adopting capitalist mode of production or communist mode of production, India chose the path of socialistic pattern of society with mixed economy. And that again was very crucial because that obviously, in fact, gave some space to India to really think about how India has to unfold in its economic sphere. And the third decision, which again is very important, which India undertook when the whole civil society was burning, India chose the path of secularism. And these 3 decisions, by and large, define Nehruvian framework. And that framework, again, guided India's foreign policy orientations. As you know, that India of late has started believing that a strength respects a strength. And unless India reaches to that level, especially having the larger technological prowess as well as a very sound economy, India will never reach to a path where India can negotiate from a position of strength. India right now has been transitioning from a middle power to a great power, and that really has taken a lot of effort which India has put, especially in the context of elevating its status in the international system. India in South Asia, there is no denying the fact that India occupies a pivotal position. Whether it is acceptable by India's neighborhood or not, India's landmass of, if you see South Asia's landmass, India occupies 80% of landmass. India's contribution to the GDP of South Asian economy is roughly 80 to 85%. So you can imagine that India certainly occupies a pivotal position. India does not want to be seen as a preeminent power in South Asia. It has to be bestowed upon. India cannot really assume. It has to be conferred by its neighborhood. India has confronted a series of challenges which have emanated over the period, especially at the national security front. But let me tell you, the word national security now is being revisited. The definition of national security is no more restricted that how India manages a standoff with China, how India manages cross-border terrorism with Pakistan. I think it has gone much beyond the definition of managing its neighborhood. I think these have become a normal routine for India, especially in managing the challenges emanating from either Pakistan or China. But I think national security contours itself is changing. The definition of national security itself is, in fact, moving ahead in a manner where the ambit of the concept itself is going to be completely enlarged. And especially in the context of COVID-19, I think one can certainly see that this COVID-19 has all the potential of an actual war. Any war which again, in fact, articulates the objectives. I think all the objectives of a war are being realized through this COVID-19. And it has engulfed, I think, if I'm right, around 185 countries across the globe. And that is showing the effectiveness of such virus, which again is not only taking the lives, but also is impacting on the world economy. And that perhaps speaks volume about the war type of scenario in the current context. So India has to understand the national security in a much broader context. As I said, it is no more restricting itself in managing only a standoff with China or managing the challenges coming from Nepal's new map or managing Pakistan's cross-border terrorism. I think it has to go much beyond. If India has to become a rising power, if India has to become a great power, I think India has to change its orientations, especially in the context of foreign policy. How the nature of federal system has changed over the period. I think in the multipolar system, India has been finding ways and mechanisms to work with all the multiple poles of power. India cannot afford to work with a particular country. India cannot show any tilt towards any of these major powers, which can really put India in a difficult situation. India has to find ways and mechanisms, and India has been learning from the experience. India has its ambition. India has been unfolding. There is no denying the fact, despite all the odds, especially not only from the external sources, but also from internal security threats. And any internal security threat, if India takes up as a part of challenge, I think India certainly finds the linkages of India's internal security threats with external dimension. Whether it is left-wing extremism, or whether it is insurgency in the Northeast, or for that matter, any of the things which one takes up, these are all finding its linkages with external dimension. So India now has been showing its maturity in terms of absorbing these shocks and finding ways and mechanisms to see that how this is dealt at a level where the things cannot go beyond a point. In the sense, even the standoff you see, the way India has shown its maturity. It's not only this, even if you take Doklam as a case in point, how India basically dealt with Doklam, how India's diplomatic maneuvering obviously proved to be very effective, how that effectiveness of India's diplomacy obviously kept China away from escalation of the conflict. I think conflict certainly is not the issue right now. India's foreign policy orientations completely depend upon how India believes in a very conducive environment. And that conducive environment only can help India rise. India has to build a very, in fact, a good environment across its neighborhood. And India has certainly been showing a lot of resilience in terms of addressing to these many issues, which impacts India's overall goals. I think realizing the goals of India's foreign policy is perhaps the most difficult task, because it is not only you are changing the action of other countries, which is not under the control of India. Domestic issues can really be addressed, but at the same time, when you are trying to portray something to be changed, either in India's neighborhood or at the global scale, that becomes a complex task for foreign policy making. One of the things basically which is very important, especially in the context of India's elevation of its status, is from day one, and I really completely agree with Professor Mohite, the ascendant temper of Nehruvian framework. That really gave a very strong base for India in terms of moving ahead. Whatever India has achieved, especially in the last 7 decades, in the science and technology arena, that has provided a basis for India's improvement of its image. It is not only economic power, it is not only military power, it is again the resources, which again has to be channelized in a manner which can really give a solid base for a country to promote its interests. I think the way India has unfolded, despite all odds, despite the sanctions regime, despite the challenges coming from the countries across the globe, at every level, India has confronted those challenges. And the way India got unfolded, especially in the field of strategic technologies, which really has made India at least heard at the global level. If you ask me a question, what is it that has changed the global perception of India? I think the first and foremost thing I will tell you, it is only because India really has moved towards achieving certain strategic technologies, which has made India, in a way, heard at the global scale. It is obviously economic, as you know, that whole decade of 90s, again, was seen to be an experiment for India. India basically had closed economy, as I said, after India became independent. And when India opened up, and the way the things really got unfolded for India's larger benefit, especially in terms of linking with the rest of the world, becoming a major player for the globalization, I think this really changed the perception of the globe towards India in a much better manner. Why in fact, the US came to India. despite the fact the United States really had punished India after India's first Pokhran test. And again, the US coming to India again shows that they recognized India's potential. They recognized that how India has really been moving ahead in terms of achieving certain poise in the technological sphere, which has really put India at a different level. India has shown a greater deal of maturity, and that maturity is largely seen in the context of not basically proliferating any technology. India has never been a part of horizontal proliferation. India always really believed that how best India can show certain responsibility to the international system. Despite being a non-signatory to the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, India has shown a great resilience to itself in terms of maintaining and the guidelines mentioned in the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. A lot of factors are there emerging as one of the largest commercial market. A lot of these factors really have brought India to a level now where India certainly is moving ahead, transitioning towards the agenda setting. I think a global agenda setting certainly is going to be one of the priorities of India right now. When you understand India's foreign policy choices and what are those India's foreign policy priorities and try to synergize that, I think India certainly is going to be a perfect case study to understand that how India has transitioned itself. Yesterday only, President Trump now has invited India to become a part of G7, and that itself shows that how the recognition of India is coming from elsewhere. No country can afford to assume or really bestow the power status to one's own self. I think the power status depends upon how the recognition comes from elsewhere in the world, and that perhaps is happening now slowly and steadily. India has been moving ahead slowly and steadily towards achieving certain goals, which again would place India at, in fact, the top of the global radar screen. If you ask me about the tools of India's foreign policy, I think this is very simple. As I said, the tools of India's foreign policy, the pivotal of that tool is a strategic autonomy in the decision-making process. India has shown resilience. India has never worked on pressure. It's a question of perception. How the rest of the world build perception of India. And sometimes, in fact, a lot of these debates have happened that India has tilted towards the United States. India has tilted towards Russia. I think these debates again require certain objective assessment, and objective analysis can only help India that what are those areas which again requires to be seen where India has shown assertiveness. And that assertiveness obviously was linked with a strategic autonomy in the decision-making process. India certainly has never believed in alliance building. India will never become an ally of any country across the globe. India will remain completely away from the alliance building system in its foreign policy orientation. If you see the larger issue which again has in fact propelled India to move ahead and really show its larger achievement is only because of strategic competition. And that strategic competition, again, India is very cautious and careful. It will not go China way. It will never really move ahead in terms of becoming a very strong a country for promoting arms and become a part of arms race. I think India understands this requirement very well, and in that context, in fact, it really sees the relevance of those technologies which become very important for India's national security. I think one point which I want to bring, because then perhaps if I don't touch upon that, I have to speak too many things, because if you bring national security, there are too many things to be spoken about. I think one of the things where India is showing certain sign of responsibility in terms of not only protecting its interests, but also showing the sign of responsibility in protecting the global interests, and that is perhaps happening in outer space. How India basically has been opining about the various factors which have impacted negatively by space weaponization. And India has conducted anti-satellite tests. But at the same time, India has not been continuing with the anti-satellite tests. If you can see the type of tests which really have been conducted recently by Russia and the United States, and obviously China conducted, all these tests again have gone beyond the expectations of the rest of the world. India's conducting of anti-satellite tests was nothing but achieving a space-based deterrent capability. And again, its interest in a space has been increasing significantly, and still India strongly believes that how India uses outer space for civilian purposes. Despite the fact that there is some minor change in India's foreign policy orientation in outer space by declaring the establishment of Defense Space Research Agency and that again might really move ahead largely in terms of declaring some dedicated satellite for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability. What I mean to say here that India is certainly guided and dictated by the events which are shaping the world system. And the shaping of the world system is something which again is not really restricted to a particular country. If you see the type of a spacefaring nation during the first decade of this century, especially from 2001 to 2010, and again if you see the last 10 years, I think numbers have gone manifold. So I think that shows that how the countries have been dictated by the behavioral patterns of certain specific country. And these again are very, very important. India's foreign policy orientations with regard to national security cannot be completed unless and until one discusses the maritime domain. I think maritime domain is emerging as the most important global commons, and that perhaps is again showing the sign of all competition as well as contest and cooperation. So I think you can see the type of thing which is happening in Indo-Pacific, the type of permutations and combinations which are being built in Indo-Pacific, the challenges which are coming from certain specific country. I think these are all being seen as a major part of challenge for India's foreign policy orientations, because this cannot really be addressed unless India assesses itself that how India has to play a very pivotal role in building a security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. And that perhaps speaks volume about India's acceptance by some of the major powers, which again, in fact, is welcoming India's role, increasing role in Indo-Pacific. So I think these changes which have occurred, especially in the context of understanding the larger contours of the world system, as well as where does India place itself, how India prioritizes its interests, these become very, very important. The other important area where India has shown a lot of development, not only for itself, but obviously for the rest of the world, and that is in the field of ICT. And ICT perhaps is an area where India certainly has to understand the ongoing pulse of the international system. How best India can really be able to protect its critical infrastructure, because the threat is going to be on critical infrastructure. The foreign policy choices which India has to make largely in protecting its critical infrastructure again depends upon its capability. And that would again become critical to India's foreign policy orientation. So I think these issues are very important in the current context where the cyber domain is becoming very, very prominent, and India's policy choices, the foreign policy choices really is seen to be one of the factors by which India can really improve upon, and India can protect and secure the critical infrastructure. A lot of these factors which are again very important, especially in the context of the development and advances which the world has been witnessing in the field of science and technology, including robotics and artificial intelligence. I think those, again, because of paucity of time, I will not go and talk about these many factors, but at the same time, India certainly is very cautiously watching these developments and also trying to understand these very developments from a point which could again help India place itself in achieving certain prowess in those technologies which could really defend and protect India's interests, and that would be paramount. What I would like to, in fact, end my talk with is to say that India has learned a lot of lessons in the last 7 decades, and these lessons now have been making India a very mature, a very cautious, and a very, a very resilient country. And that perhaps is now being accepted by the rest of the world. And this acceptance by the rest of the world obviously will help India elevate its image in the international system. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Khan. I hope you are there, or you have left as a host.
Yes, I'm there. I'm just searching Professor Arvind Kumar, Professor Ashwini Mahapatra. I hope he has reached, but he is still not visible onto the screen. Before I ask Professor Ashwini Mahapatra sir to give the validity address, it was very nice to hear very, very minute details on how India should go ahead with respect to national security issues. Professor Arvind Kumar has been putting a lot of efforts onto developing a lot of cyber issues and issues like defense development and defense procurement. Now there are also many other issues which he could have enlarged, but then we also have a lot of time bondings. So now I request Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, if he is here. Is he here? Professor Ashwini Mahapatra? I just Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, is he here?
No, sir. No.
Because he gave me a message that he's here.
Name on
Just give me a minute. I'll just talk to him.
Hello.
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 He says he is there, but he's not being visible. He is present.
Please say the name. What is the name of the Zoom app? Then I will search and muted.
Yes, I'll just tell him.
आप नाम पूछ लो, उन्होंने नाम क्या डाला है Zoom app पे? I will unmute you.
Yes, what should I tell him?
Hello.
Hello. Yes, I've asked him to
Yes,
give the chat.
Hello. Sir, say Ashwini sir unmuted itself. Yeah.
Professor Ashwini Patra.
Yes, unmuted itself. करने को बोलो. I will set it to properly.
His number is 91109910312774. Here again message me saying kindly unmute me. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. He has messaged me saying kindly unmute me.
Yes, already
Ashwin
unmuted,
Mahapatra,
sir. Yes. Say itself you muted. Say itself you आप वो खुद कर सकते हैं खुद को. Mute unmute कर सकते हैं.
Okay, he can do himself only.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Ashwin sir. Yes,
Hello.
you're audible, sir.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ashwini, sir, you're audible.
Professor Liaquat, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir, you continue.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Hello.
Validity address
Hello.
for this particular webinar. Hello, sir. You're audible.
Hello.
Yes,
Am I
sir.
audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir, we are all audible. You continue.
Sir, you're audible, sir. Kindly continue.
Shall I start?
Yes, sir. Sir, you can start.
Hello.
Hello, sir. You can start.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Hello.
Sir, you are
Hello,
audible.
Professor Liaquat. Can I start?
Yes, sir. You can
Yes,
start.
sir, you are audible.
Sir, you are audible, sir. Kindly
Shall I
continue.
start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You start. Sir, you can start. You are audible.
Hello.
Sir.
सर आप बोल सकते हैं, बोलिए।
Yes. Thank you.
Start, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Professor Liaquat,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
for having me here.
Go ahead. Principal, go ahead.
It's your audible.
So, okay, thank you, Professor Liaquat.
Yeah.
So, so I had the privilege of listening to Professor Arvind Kumar and Rajiv Ranjan ji and others. I have been instructed to speak on India and the Gulf region, but before I begin that, I'll just take 5 to 7 minutes as regards my take on the issue raised by my predecessor, my preceding speakers. Both of them gave a detailed description about the changing nature of India's foreign policy and the Indian foreign policy response so far. But more or less, their entire description of the analysis otherwise is in line with the kind of analysis so far we are used to. In the given situation today, what I call like a turning point so far the global politics is concerned, we need to relook and revisit our foreign policy practices and foreign policy orientation. It's not India today is a big power because of the external recognition. And again, if there has been the external recognition, then something else has happened externally, which is more relevant, important than what has happened inside India. So when you look at the external arena in which the policymakers generally operate, I guess in last 10 years, you have fundamental structural transformation, which was never seen before since the end of Cold War. And the fundamental structural transformation that I mentioned just now is well reflected with the rise of China. So all of us more or less familiar with the Chinese economic miracle, but one statement that I would like to make here, this so-called Chinese economic miracle, China as an ascendant power, China as a challenger to the global hegemon represented by United States of America, China as a challenge to, somebody mentioned about the Eurocentric international order, China as a challenge to so-called American unilateralism, often reminds me of the late 1970s and the early 1980s, when many of our scholars, IS scholars, social scientists, consciously, unconsciously, which include all leading scholars, used to describe Islamist fundamentalism or Islamism as a part of third world movement, because it's only movement which is today pitted against the American hegemony. This kind of, we draw that kind of what I call a little bit of say ego satisfaction by portraying something what it is not realistically. So somewhere I find a kind of mismatch between the way we develop a narrative on the one hand and what the realities are. We tend to obscure the realities, which are very much important so that interpretation is concerned. Based on interpretation again requires the subjective perception of reality. Reality is not what it is. Reality is what you perceive it to be. So based on perception, interpretation, then we have the policy formulation. So in a broader analytical framework, if we look at rise of China today, it's not because China's transgression into the Indian territory, that's happening since the first week of May. Look at this entire is kind of brinkmanship or the aggressive behavior across the globe, whether it is vis-a-vis the European Union member country, whether it is vis-a-vis Australia or other Indo-Pacific countries or neighboring countries. The way it has of late tried to bully other countries into accepting the diktat of Beijing a kind of securing compliance to the coercive use of raw power never happened before. I mean, America never did it the way it does it so blatantly and brazenly today. And that way, on a particular issue, when it has been cornered, particularly where it has been exposed in terms of its criminal negligence and cover-up of not sharing the information, vital information regarding the origin of the Wuhan virus, to something unprecedented. Second, here comes the issue, why China behaved the way it does. That's a fundamental issue before all of us. We need to understand that China today is an aspiring hegemon, and that aspiring hegemon which is trying hard or in a positioning itself to replace United States of America, which happens to be a declining hegemon. In other words, 1958, the book written by Organsky, and he for the first time came out with a new theoretical formulation as regards the power transition, and he foresaw that time the potential rise of China as a challenger to the US dominated, or what I call hegemonic power management of the international system. That happened. So it's a situation today. So when the international system is concerned, here all depends on China's level of perception about the existing status quo. Number two, powers and the Chinese strive for power parity. And that's the two things which prompt China to go all hog against the United States of America, both in terms of real politics, that's hard power politics, in terms of normative building, in terms of narrative building. So that's one aspect. Second, internally, see, China is an undemocratic, totally totalitarian state. It's more than that. It's a state, what I call often, is a state, is a surveillance state par excellence. We heard about all this authoritarian regime in West Asia, tin pot dictator in South Africa, which are definitely nonetheless quite authoritarian. But the kind of surveillance technology it has developed, which was never seen before globally. So is a country which is completely authoritarian and which has taken advantage of its political economic integration into international system by taking advantage of the democratic space available to an undemocratic regime externally. In the process, it has forced a huge infrastructure, which includes co-option of the think tank, intellectuals and others, in resetting norms as regards the international system. Look at the kind of threat it poses. Not simply somebody mentions Sinocentric world order, replacing this Eurocentric or US-centric world order. It's more than that. It's a question of norms and values that it challenges to us, that it poses a kind of serious challenge. Then, when I look at China internally, since 1991, Chinese regime has promoted what is, I call it, the hegemonic ideology, very much manifested in terms of Chinese nationalism. Study its entire education policy, the textbook, history textbook. What does it preach? It has created a kind of new generation of nationalist, and nationalism, in other words, has turned the present Chinese generation of youth hawkish. They expect, they demand from the centralized government to act in defense of the Chinese interest. What is the Chinese interest? Chinese interest very much reflected in another aspect of the Chinese history, that is rejuvenation of China. That is restoration of China to a central position, well reflected in the Asia Dream. So there is a dilemma. So far, the Chinese Communist Party's response to the crisis, the current crisis concerned, how best you placate the younger generation, who they have oriented in such a way over the years, last 2 decades, since 1991-92, introduction of the patriotic education in China. So there are pressure on the Chinese government, the CCP, to act tough vis-a-vis other countries, at least to demonstrate to its the youth generation, oh, they are not running away, they are not fighting shy, they are instead taking top position and very much in line with the so-called glorified Chinese history. Okay, so they are trying to project today more as a victor than the victim, reminding about the kind of the movement they waged in the wake of the Japanese invasion of China, and to an extent, it was successful 1949 revolution led by Mao Zedong. So what I'm trying to tell you here is the present generation of youth in China are not the typical red guards, which are the product of this Mao Zedong cultural revolution. They are ultra nationalist, and to great extent, they're hawkish. They put sufficient pressure on China to act tough, to demonstrate or translate its so-called hard power into practice, into securing the forced compliance from the neighboring countries, including India. And all other countries outside China are called strangers and the barbarians. They're all ganging up against China today, what they did way back in 19th century till the Opium War. So you need to actually understand the Chinese position holistically, not based on selective facts. So in the broader context, where China threat remains a reality, how India should behave. The whole entire policy is centered around stand alone, that we have sufficient capacity to deal with the territorial dispute with China. I think we need to move away from that. Because I happen to have studied more about West Asia. Today, I find India's position very much comparable to position of Turkey in the 1940s and the early 1950s. In the interwar period, Turkey typically pursued a policy of neutrality. It refused to align with either of the two blocs, but it was forced to opt for alignment policy because of the emerging imbalance of threat in the wake of the threat posed by a neighbor, a hostile neighbor, a neighbor which is emerging global power. I think when you have that kind of imbalance of threat, we have to move past the policy of non-alignment and towards a kind of alignment. These are the structural requirement for your own security and survival. So if we look at broadly, India needs to look beyond its traditional policy centered on the so-called strategic autonomy. Yes, we need to get out of this too much of psychological obsession of this strategic autonomy and this what I call the civilizational exceptionalism. These are fine. The idealism today will not work in dealing with the potential threat posed by the People's Republic of China. That's a reality. We need to deal with it. So how you deal with it? My take on this issue is very simple. Today, somebody mentioned about the post-COVID global order. Quite a few American scholars predicted about the continuation of US-led international system. Somebody talked about the post-American international system. My take on the issue is we don't look towards a post-America international system. It could be post-American, I'm sorry. It could be post-American, but not necessarily entire American. It would be international system with America, not without America. But then what kind of shape it is likely to take? It could be my humble submission to all of you to reflect on this, the emergence of a concert of democracy, what I call the concert of democracy, not simply concert of power. The time has come for all the consolidated liberal democracy to come together, because the democracy is the essential precondition for international stability and peace. Look at the country like China, which is totalitarian, but has taken advantage of the democratic space available internationally to turn out to build up its material base and subsequently military base. It is the wealth which underpins the military. That's what John Paul Kennedy once mentioned that. So he says it is the richness, the material base, the wealth underpins your military, and military is needed to protect and acquire wealth outside. So look at this kind of nexus between the wealth and military power. Even if they apparently look to a parallel line, but at given point of time, you find the convergence of the objective. So what I'm trying to suggest here is India should look towards a kind of new structure which is emerging. If I read this slide emanating from Europe today, like the latest proposal floated by the UK Prime Minister, the D10, Democracy 10. So in a way, India is likely to find a place there along with other fully developed and fully liberal democratic countries together. And to begin with, it could be simply informal alliance based, and it could be a single issue specific, but subsequently it could incorporate other issues as well, affecting the global interest, particularly related to security and stability of the international system. So what I'm trying to tell you here is my interest take on this whole issue is we need to go beyond our psychological obsession, in a way, the fixation with so-called strategic autonomy. But thereby, I'm not suggesting that we completely throw away the strategic autonomy. But definitely what I'm trying to indicate here is when you opt for some kind of informal alliance, not a formal alliance, it will definitely entail some amount of compromise, dilution, so far the strict strategic autonomy adherence is concerned, number one. Number two, we need to move beyond or move ahead this conventional policy of non-alignment to a kind of alignment faced with what I said, China's threat, which is create, again, to quote another American scholar, quote unquote, imbalance of threat. Imbalance of threat structurally requires balancing or bandwagoning. We cannot bandwagon so far China is concerned, but normatively, ideologically, and materially, because we happen to be a competitor, contestant, so the Chinese primacy in Southeast is concerned. So only option left before us is balancing the threat, not the power. Thank you very much. And second part is the Gulf part of it. I'll just very briefly mention about the Gulf, because I have been asked to speak on the Gulf. You see, since 2015, I do not hesitate to say the 10 years of UPA government led by Congress party, which was internally focused, more inward looking, and foreign policy of country always occupy the low priority. That's, I call it, in no uncertain term, no unambiguous term, a lost decade. At a time when China's rise was quite evident, at a time the Americans were looking towards towards India, well reflected in signing of the civilian nuclear deal in 2005 for some kind of informal alliance or kind of strategic partnership. We were quite hesitant. We didn't assess the kind of threat posed by China, because we allowed ourselves to be beguiled into believing this all the goody things the Chinese was telling us, the way it happened in 1962. So what I'm trying to tell you here is the real policy thrust towards the West Asia in general and the Gulf started with rise of Prime Minister Modi, because the whole idea of the centerpiece of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy was universal engagement. And the look west, that is towards West Asia, was a part of the universal engagement foreign policy of Prime Minister Modi. And it had twin objectives. One, neutralizing the ideological roots of terrorism, which is nothing but the radical Islamist terror, which remained an enduring source of security concern for our country. And second was to retrieve the strategic space that we apparently had lost at a time when the American influence was diminishing, and at a time China was trying to position itself in the strategic vacuum created by the gradual retreat of the United States of America in the internal issues. So, to an extent, India has been successful since 2015 onwards, number one, in neutralizing the ideological roots of Islamist terror by getting support of the two leading Gulf countries, UAE and Saudi Arabia. And there were no way likely to support Pakistan, whether it was in OIC or any other international fora against India. And all of you are well aware of this whole thing that happened recently at OIC meeting as regards the Pakistani initiatives to condemn and isolate India on the issue of so-called Islamophobia, quote unquote Islamophobia. That simply fell apart. Nothing happened. And a small country like Maldives, they took the initiative, took the lead, and all other Islamic countries supported Maldives. So that's huge success. The second is where we have not made much progress. That is maintaining a relation with all the countries in the regions. That is basically described as a dehyphenating, like whether it is Israel-Palestine or India's relation with Saudi Arabia on the one hand and Iran on the other. we have not been successful in making enough progress in terms of building of relationship with the rivals or the competitors or the competing internal actors so far West Asia scene is concerned. And third is in terms of investment, yes, we have been quite successful in drawing investment. All of you well aware of the Saudis' investment in the private company, Ambani company here, and the Reliance company here. And the fourth is in terms of energy security. We have managed to get oil when this oil price was down recently to ensure our security in case of any kind of contingency. And but another failure is that's extremely difficult. Is a huge diplomatic challenge. That's something called the tightrope walking. How do you walk between the two rivals, which normally eyeball to eyeball all the time, whether it's Israel, Palestine, or Saudi Arabia and Iran on the other hand. We tried in 2016, they building up the Chahabar port in our efforts to counter the BRI flagship program, the CPEC. Okay, that's all of you well aware of this. Its strategic importance, but that somehow turned out to be a kind of failed project because of the American unilateral decision to suspend that deal regarding the controversial nuclear armed program of Iran. So in a way, West Asia remain even today is quite fragmented. So this fragmentary character of West Asia poses certain challenge to any external power, as much to America as to India. So here we'll be always constrained to take side of either of the groups. We have the three major hotspots in the regions, which are likely to escalate further. There's no way you can look for a kind of resolution of the problem. Number one, Yemen. Number two, the civil war in Syria. Number three, Libya, where you have the two governments at the same time, which are being supported by all kinds of internal actors in West Asia. So it's extremely difficult and complicated. So far, the Indian diplomacy or Indian main objective of establishing its in a way is political and diplomatic leverage in the region. But then what is likely to happen? That's my reading of the situation. Is even though China of late has been trying hard to make inroads into West Asia, it has been successful only to an extent in securing the reciprocal relationship or reciprocal ties with countries like Iran and in case of Syria because of its support to Syria along with Russia against the Western sanction. Second, Iran by becoming the largest importer of Iran oil. But when China supports this country, obviously it alienates itself from other countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia. What happened normally. So this is one aspect of it. And these countries are quite convinced of the fact that China today doesn't have that kind of resources to assure the security guarantees the way America has been doing so far, regardless of its own strategic and economic interests in the region. So in a way, what's likely to happen? One is in case America is a battered kind of power for a variety of reasons. It doesn't retain that kind of the economics of America's and that would definitely affect stability and security of the region, because West Asia, unlike South Asia, is multipolar. We have too many regional actors which have been engaged in competing for primacy, for maximizing the influence. Turkey, Israel, South. So because you have too many actors in a which happens to get vulnerable. So this region likely to remain unstable for a long time to come and posing a serious source of instability to the entire world, especially to India. So that's one aspect. And second is, in case America turns out to be the real preeminent power, there is a possibility of the country like Saudi Arabia, UAE, the Gulf countries would be jumping into this bandwagon, counter Chinese influence in the region. Number three, if the third force, that is the G10 or concern democracy reality, it will have its positive fallout. So far, the internal politics of some of the Gulf countries are concerned, there would be definitely moves towards democratization, but how and when the transition takes place remains to be seen. Ultimately, what we look forward to, democratic international order. Absence of democracy internally never was a concern national community. But today, COVID-19, the ravaging COVID-19, it spread in more than 8 countries, has awakened us and has made us realize the value of having a democratic country. So, country is not only concerned with the citizenry, but also concerned with the international community. So, in a way, those values, those ideals need to be promoted, not only promoted, translated into action, not by translating democracy, but promoting the way European Union has been engaged so far. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. An excellent movement from China to West Asia to Gulf and Turkey and all those places, and the issues that Professor Ashwini Mahapatra has dealt was wonderful. Now we would sum up with a thing, and we had first speaker Professor Dilip Mohito, who spoke on to India's domestic policy and foreign policy. There's a straight connection between domestic policy and foreign policy, and it reminds us of Bernard Brody's book that anything that happens onto the domestic, it spills over to the foreign policy, and that is how we recollect Professor Mohite speaking on to domestic and foreign policy. Then we had Dr. Uddhav Pekurul, who spoke on India-Nepal relation, where he took up us to understand what Mohite sir was speaking, that India and Nepal domestically had a huge, very, very strong relation, and for a long time we had a very wonderful.
Hello, Professor Liaquat, I'm through.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm just summing up the whole thing. And Professor Uddhav also spoke on to India-Nepal relations, and he also had brought some insights on how better India-Nepal relation could be further move away from the misunderstandings and the problems that we presently face. Could only come out from having a better negotiations, better relations. And that is where he saw that the better relation would improve India-Nepal relations. We also heard Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, who spoke on India-China relations. He also summarized pre-COVID and post-COVID relation between India and China. He also made a reference to the issue of Ladakh and Aksai Chin. And there were the border relation between India and China. Then we had Professor Arvind Kumar, who spoke on different aspects of India's foreign policy, looking towards national security as a very important component. Various parts of national security was discussed by Professor Arvind Kumar, and at last we had the recipe of hearing Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, who spoke on to from China, how India-China relations are much better, and how the improvement of foreign policy would be the next episode to be understood. Now I really call upon to Principal Dr. P.D. Devre to speak, to give us a small insight on what his understanding on foreign policy is, and the panel, to begin with the panel discussion. So I now request P.D. Devre to begin. Kindly unmute, sir. Dr. P.D. Devre sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Kindly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Are you hearing?
Yeah. You're audible, sir. Sir, we can hear you. Please.
Are you listening me?
Yes, sir. We are listening to you.
Yes. Then may I question or conclude?
You give your view. We have
सवाल पूछूं या
सवाल पूछो
हाँ गिरो, वेरी गुड वेरी गुड। मुझे इस बात की खुशी है, ओके ओके, मुझे इस बात की खुशी है कि डॉक्टर लियाकत खान, मुंबई यूनिवर्सिटी पॉलिटिकल साइंस डिपार्टमेंट और शिवले कॉलेज प्रोफेसर SM, उनकी संस्था, इन्होंने मिलकर दो में जो ये वेबिनार ऑर्गेनाइज किया आप सबके लिए। मैंने आज तक 10-15 वेबिनार अटेंड किए हैं एज ए रिसोर्स पर्सन, मगर पहली बार मैंने देखा कि डिब्रूगढ़ टू चंडीगढ़, चंडीगढ़ टू चेन्नई, चेन्नई टू मुंबई, पूरा हिंदुस्तान और ये वेबिनार में पार्टिसिपेट हुआ है। ये बहुत खुशी की बात है। और इसमें वहाँ की शिवले कॉलेज की संस्था और मुंबई यूनिवर्सिटी सिविक्स एंड पॉलिटिकल साइंस डिपार्टमेंट का बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा है, उनके लिए मैं धन्यवाद अदा करता हूँ। मुझे इस बात की खुशी है कि ये पहला वेबिनार है कि ये वेबिनार में रिसोर्स पर्सन बहुत ही बढ़िया आए थे। इन्होंने अलग अलग फील्ड के अलग अलग एक्सपर्ट थे, वो चाइना हो, नेपाल हो या अलग जगह लोग यहाँ पार्टिसिपेट हुए। इन लोगों ने बहुत अच्छी इंफॉर्मेशन सब दिया। ये पहली बार हुआ कि फॉरेन पॉलिसी के बारे में और इंटरनेशनल सिनेरियो जो अभी सब जगह न्यूज़पेपर में सब एक्सपर्ट की तरफ से बताया जाता है, ये लोगों में ये बहुत अच्छी information we got from this webinar in 2 days organization by the Civil College and the University of Mumbai. I heartily congratulate and thanks to Dr. Liaquat Ali Khan and Dr. SM Wag who nicely organized this international webinar. I also thanks to all the resource persons from various disciplines. They have very elaborately, very nicely, very informative talk they have given. I thanks to all the participants also from the various sections from India. Thank you very much.
Sir, there are, I hope we are still have some time. We can take 2 questions, and I request to respond wherever, whoever would like to respond from the panel. Professor.
Hello, Khan sir. Hello. Hello, Professor Khan sir. I have some question and some doubts and want to share some insights.
Sir,
hello. Are you listening?
Yeah, you can go ahead with your question directly.
Yes.
Okay. First of all.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Kindly directly go to the question.
Okay. My question related to India-China upcoming relationship after COVID-19 era. There are so many issues between India and China, just like NSG and Security Council membership or Pakistan-linked terror networks, hydrological cooperation, the Belt and Road Initiative. There are so many issues between these two countries. My question is that whether India should responsibly compete with this largest neighbor or should adopt aggressive foreign policy.
Brief it.
Yeah.
Brief it.
My question is.
Whom to ask the question?
I don't know who will take my question.
I will give me a chance. I will request Professor Moite to respond to this particular question. Professor Moite, I hope you are hearing me. Professor Moite or Professor Arvind Kumar, who is there on the desk. Are you here, sir? Professor Arvind Kumar, sir.
I'm here.
Sir, kindly respond to this Professor Dr. Vittal Dahifade, sir, who has given a question. Can you please repeat your question? Sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Should I repeat, sir?
Please repeat.
Sir, my question is that in the changing scenario, should India responsibly compete with our largest neighbor, or should adopt the aggressive foreign policy, making some alliances with Japan and USA?
I think this question is very, very interesting. But let me tell you, the United States and the West, they always have this objective that India and China should have a conflict.
Okay.
India should behave responsibly, China should behave responsibly. India and China both are opportunities to each other.
Yeah.
So what I mean to say here, that if the center of gravity has to be shifting from the west to the east, there I think if India-China will have a conflict, that center of gravity will never shift. So US will remain paramount. The West will never lose its relevance. So they are scared because India and China, these two are emerging economies. They have the differences, as you rightly said, they have a lot of divergences. But at the same time, if they really behave irresponsibly, the larger objective of these two countries will never be realizing. This is the right time that India and China should understand each other's predicament. They should understand each other's challenges and find ways and mechanisms to work together.
Can I add Dr. Rajiv Ranjan to further elaborate onto this particular question?
Sir, I have a question. Hello.
Wait, let Rajiv Ranjan also respond to this particular question. Yeah.
I largely agree with Professor Arvind. We have to make a balance between whether we are going to west or east. So, and then like responding to the question that whether India's foreign policy would be assertive or it's like a cooperative. And again, I think on some point, India need to have assertive policy like we are having at border like Doklam. I think standing at Doklam would have like kind of if we see like 73 Doklam in a stand up in Doklam has given some kind of leverage, and then the Chinese also became aware that India can stand up. So that's, I think, some point like border and political confrontation, China needs to show its, India needs to show its muscle. But at the same time, India has also to calibrate a very middle path that the Buddhism says that we have to have a middle path when engaging with your neighbors also. So I think in economy or like we need some political support from China, like NSG. Of course, the China has given on under pressure, but we need certain political support, whether it's a NSG, whether it's a UNSC, or whether it's nominating Pakistani terrorists at UN General Assembly. So we need, that's why I'm saying that we have to have a very calibrated approach where we should be kind of like standing up to China, but at the same time, making Chinese understand that we are there to also to cooperate. So I would say that people to people contact, economic relation, and even at some extent at political front, we need to have a cooperation. But at the same time, we also need that, having said that, we don't need to alienate the Western power, because where we get kind of like moral support or a strategic assistance. So we have to take a very balanced, and I think walking this tightrope is not that easy. So Indian policymaker, I think, I believe in Indian policymaker, they are very mature. If you will see in this Doklam, or whether it's a Quad or it's a Indo-Pacific, there I think is following a very calibrated and calculated path to responding to the Chinese rise also, and at the same time making optimal benefit from China rise. We cannot just alienate China because it's Chinese money. We need to have investment.
Taking thought from the
Hello, sir. Hello, I have a question. I have a question.
Wait a minute.
Hello.
Let me hear. Yes, sir. Let me have a view from Professor Uddhav, who is waiting for this opinion to be addressed. Professor Uddhav, is this calibrated method is advisable with respect to the region? Like when you respond to a major power, will the region respond in a common way? Will there be a will there be no competition among these neighboring states, and they have some calibration. That is where Rajiv Ranjan was talking of. I want Professor Uddhav's view onto this particular idea. Yeah, Professor Uddhav.
Thank you, Professor Saab. Yes, definitely it is very difficult for us to speak about Nepal and China. And if we speak in the line Professor Ranjan spoke, maybe more argument will come from Indian side. Oh, Nepal also started supporting China. But I think this is what is a kind of pragmatic way of doing. For example, as I mentioned, even both India and China, since Nehru era onwards, were very anxious about West, and that is true because we are different civilization and we should work together just to challenge this Western hegemony. And for this, instead of quarreling for a piece of land, rather we settle the border down. The outstanding issue would be resolved through dialogue, and then make a conducive environment. And definitely the way Professor from JNU discuss about the kind of foreign policy from Indian side. For Nepal, you see, for us it's a bit different. The way people in India understood. For example, whenever India is very proactive as far as foreign relation or neighborhood relation is concerned, then there is problem within neighborhood. For example, Rajiv Gandhi was quite active, and Nepal was blockaded by Indian state in 1989. And yes, then at least during Manmohan Singh and Vajpayee and even I.K. Gujral, we are having very good relation because as Professor Saab mentioned, it was not assertive. And we didn't have this kind of very difficult situation. And once Modi ji came in the power with kind of neighborhood first policy, then we were the sufferer. They imposed blockade, and now again there is kind of tussle. And during the pandemic, we could have avoided this pandemic working together, and that is where I subscribed Modi's initial initiative to come up with kind of fund, South Asian regional fund. Even every country contributed for this, and eventually it couldn't move ahead because of kind of way of modus operandi suggested by India. That is why you see definitely India is kind of center of South Asia, but being center of South Asia, it should also understood kind of state, this small state sentiment as well. And small state psychology is kind of psychology. You have referred, for example, India and China, vis-a-vis India and China. This is vis-a-vis Nepal and India as well. The way you look at China, we also look at India similar manner. Thank you so much, sir.
Further view.
Liaquat, sir.
Take this your view with Professor Mohite to respond on why India is not able.
Mohin Kachikar wants something.
Professor Mohite, please, can you respond on why India is not able to integrate into the region in this pandemic period? Yes, sir. Professor Mohite, kindly respond. Professor Mohite, I hope Mohite sir is there. Professor Mohite.
Professor Mohan Kachikar wants something.
We will take, sir. Let me finish one round with all. Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, are you there, sir? Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, sir.
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah. Kindly respond to like what would be the strategy of India's foreign policy when Uddhav says the aggressive foreign policy does not work in integration within the region. How do you view this point?
Obviously, Professor Liaquat, in response to this question, I won't say we have to be aggressive, but we need to be seen aggressive in response to the I see, which is quite real. We should not be seen subdued, okay? And, we shouldn't be giving the impression to the international community that we are the kind of country which could be easily cowed, okay, by the pressure tactics of China. But at the same time, we need to have a long-term strategy as to how to counter and contain Chinese influence in South Asia and beyond. If they create problem for us in South Asia, we can do it in league with the countries Indo-Pacific, targeting China where China finds its position quite vulnerable. We have the advantageous position and over the Malacca Strait. A strategic, a military strategist would better elucidate how the kind of advantage that we enjoy, and where China today imports more than 50% of its energy requirement from West Asia, and most of the supply routes pass through that. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that requires some kind of informal understanding, if not a formal alliance, between India on the one side and the Indo-Pacific country, particularly the leading actors of the region, which include Australia, Japan, Vietnam, and the Philippines. We together, of course, the American presence is already there, naval presence is already there, because it has the military age over China. We need support, and America requires Indian involvement. And we need to, somebody mentioned the calibrated. It is to be calibrated, because you need to actually base our foreign policy on how much you are going to gain in return for how much you're going to lose. That kind of assessment has to be done by the diplomat, the policymakers. You and me sitting out here cannot do it. But theoretically speaking, as I mentioned before, the structural requirements are that we need to opt for a kind of alignment. There is no other option. The so-called Buddhist principle, middle way, these are simply poppycock. In reality, it doesn't cut much ice. Honestly speaking, so for the territorial integrity and the protection of the Indian national sovereignty, that more so, let me put it this way, the ontological security of India, the way India has been defined, the way India has been known globally, that's more important. That is being threatened by China. So that's I'm very clear about it. We need to look beyond the conventional policy centered around strategic autonomy, civilization exceptionalism, middle path, cooperation. We did all that sloganeering before. We had a little weaker government under UPM idea, which had no strategic vision. Get your point? We have a strong leadership. And look at last 1 week, somebody started the anti-China campaign, boycott Chinese product. The way it is picking up, it's basically reflective of the national voice. The time has come for us to call a spade and call it.
Yeah, Professor Mohite, kindly,
yes, can you hear me?
Not be able to integrate the region.
No, the reason what actually, the difference between China and India is that India would like to have a hegemony in South Asia. Now, hegemony not in the sense that, you forcefully get certain things done from, say, like Sri Lanka, for example, offered to develop Hambleton Port. First offer came to India, but then subsequently India ruled out, and then finally it went to China. Now, such opportunity should not be missed. One should be aggressive in the sense, what I'm saying is that you should try to, aggressively put forward your point and convince that we are not having any hegemonic in a political sense intentions so far as our neighbors are concerned. We respect their sovereignty, we respect their integrity, we respect their economic and social interest, we respect their integrity in the sense, in a geopolitical sense, and therefore, unless you have that kind of a convincing power through aggressive diplomacy, then only they will be convinced. Otherwise, they will have a bargaining kind of a game.
Bargain will happen.
Bargaining. Like, for example, if we pressurize Nepal, they will lean towards China. If China pressurizes them, they will lean towards India. Now, similar thing applies to Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Seychelles or Maldives. But so far as Pakistan is concerned, I think the Chinese, what I'm trying to tell you is that the Chinese involvement and investment is so deep that they would not like Pakistan to be damaged from the strategic perspective, because their interest is involved in Pakistan.
Sir,
In the similar way,
I would be happy to
the
hear
US
your
interest is
thoughts.
also. नहीं, एक नहीं है.
We would love to
at-
hear
in
you,
the
sir.
same
But we are short of time. The bandwidth will go. I would request.
Is actually practiced by China as well as by the. So as long as they are going to protect Pakistan and save Pakistan, India will not be able to do anything. Yesterday, Professor was saying that maybe we'll have POK with us. No, I don't think it will be possible.
Yes. Yes, sir. Now I hand over the desk to Professor P.D. Devre sir to sum up and give us a vote of thanks. Yes. Dr. P.D. Devre sir.
2 minutes.
Yes. Devre sir, kindly sum up within 2 minutes. We don't have much time. Otherwise, the bandwidth will be over. Kindly sum up within 2 minutes. Yeah. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Dr. P.D. Devre sir, kindly proceed. Yes, Devre sir.
Yes.
Devre sir, please begin.
मुझे
हेलो. अरे वोट
हाँ,
ऑफ थैंक्स मैं करने वाला हूँ. उनको खाली वो पिन.
Devre sir, kindly give your views. Vote of thanks will be given by Dr. S.M. Wag sir. Devre sir, kindly proceed.
Okay na. I have already told na. Hello. Hello.
Now we request Dr. S.M. Wag sir to give the vote of thanks.
अभी
हाँ.
अरे म्यूट कुठे.
Dr. Wag, kindly proceed for the vote of thanks.
Okay. Hey, Avi. Come, hurry up.
Audible, sir.
Huh?
We are audible, sir. Wag sir, we are audible. Start it.
अच्छा म्यूट कुठे गेले.
Hello.
Hello. हाँ.
We are audible, sir. Continue.
हाँ, okay. करना. हाँ, चालू है. Hello. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Friends, thank you very much. And there is a very good session and very good discussion on variable topic. So last session, what was saying, friends, COVID-19 impact on Indian policy has been discussed in this webinar for 2 days. We hope this discussion will be more useful to all of us. This is the output of this webinar. Friends, we are proud of to announce that total 2,180 professors from various countries and all over India have participated in this webinar. This is the highest project in terms of number of participation. Of course, all the credit goes to all of you. We hope to be in touch with each other after this webinar also. I would like to thank our president this webinar, Honorable Sri Gujaram Pawar Sahib and their director body. Our principal Dr. S.M. Patil sir, Vice Principal Dr. Geeta Vishe madam, resource person Professor Dr. Madhav Nalpat Manipal, Professor Uddhav Burakal Nepal, Professor Dr. Manish Gujarat, Professor Dastesh Parulekar Goa, Principal Dr. P. Devre sir Jalgaon, Professor Dilip Moite, sir, Gujarat. Professor Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, Shanghai University, China. Professor Arvind Kumar, Manipal. Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, JNU, Delhi. Professor Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe, Madam. Professor P.D. Sonone, sir. Dr. Liaquat Khan, sir. Joint Coordinator, Organizing Secretary, Hemangi Talele, Madam. Technical Support, Sri Mayur Avar. Mr. Sachin Tadle, sir. Professor Harshal Patil Bhusawal, and my college staff, on the behalf of my institute, college, and Department of Political Science, Mumbai University. Friends, feedback from his mandatory to provide his certificate. Feedback link will be provided after end of the session through email. Truly, thanks to all of you. With this, I am declaring that today's international webinar is over. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care.